Hello, and welcome to Space News Day 25. Very excited to have you here. My name's Mike. We are going to go through a few articles today. We're going to follow up on the Intuitive Machines' first commercial lunar lander. We are going to talk a little bit about one of the payloads that's on board that lander. We are going to talk about the Varda reentry. So this is a biopharmaceutical lab in space that was finally given clearance to land. And finally, we will talk about the ERS-2 reentry, which was a dead satellite that was going to break up in space and drop a few bits and pieces of itself on top of potentially some of our heads. So let's find out together where that landed. Very exciting show for you today. Thanks for sticking around. Let's start with this is the Intuitive Machines lander Odysseus, also known as Nova-C. Its intention is to make a soft landing on the moon. So we have these lunar legs. It'll have its own thrust to slow itself down as it attempts to descend onto the moon's surface. At some point, it will drop off a series of payloads, one of which was created by a student group that will be taking pictures of the lander as it descends. Another, as we will talk about in a few minutes, is a payload designed to act as cold storage. They're trying to get up to 8 terabytes worth of data as part of their inaugural test of holding data long-term for whichever company decides they want to pay for that. Lunar lander mission entered orbit around the moon February 21st, setting up a landing attempt in a day. It has finished its Cislunar voyage and is now orbiting around the moon. The company announced on social media that the Nova-C lander performed a 408-second burn of its main engine. It's traveling past the moon. It's going to turn itself prograde and fire its engine here for 408 seconds to slow itself down enough to then be captured by the moon's gravity, placing the spacecraft into a circular orbit about the moon at an altitude of 92 kilometers. So this would be very low Earth orbit if we were comparing this to our lovely planet. For the moon, you want to get as close as you can if you're going to make a landing within reason. So the maneuver, which changed the spacecraft's velocity by 800 meters per second, was completed with an accuracy of 2 meters per second. So they required a delta V of 800 if you are speaking in Kerbal Space Program terms. Intuitive Machines did not disclose the exact time of the burn in its announcement yesterday. I assume Eastern was yesterday. The spacecraft had been on a trajectory that would have taken it about 100 kilometers from the moon. The insertion burn came after 2 trajectory correction maneuvers to refine the spacecraft's path to the moon, with the company concluding a third planned maneuver was not needed. The engine, which uses liquid oxygen and methane propellants, was tested in space for the first time in a commissioning maneuver February 16th. This was a point that they knew was going to increase their confidence if they had passed it, because this propellant was brand new technology for them. Company executives said before the launch that successfully completing the test would give them greater confidence that the engine would work as required for a soft landing. So with the spacecraft now in orbit, Intuitive Machines is moving ahead with plans for the landing on February 22nd. So that is today. Very exciting. Eastern. And they will be landing in the Malaparte A crater on the moon. The mission is carrying 6 NASA payloads through NASA's Commercial Lunar Payload Services Program. The CLPS program is NASA's way to get a bunch of payloads for cheap onto the moon to encourage moon-based technology. There are currently plenty of other countries that are trying to form moon bases and get more technology on the moon. And of course, the Americans want to be first, want to have as much control as possible going forwards. The spacecraft is also carrying 6 payloads for non-NASA customers, such as artwork, data archive, and a small astronomical telescope. So this data archive, I believe, is going to be is referring to this second article we will talk about. If the landing is successful, Intuitive Machines will become the first non-governmental entity to successfully soft land on the moon. An Israel Space IL lander Bereshit crashed during a 2019 landing attempt, and another Japanese craft has also crashed during its landing in 2023. The Peregrine lander, which was supposed to be the first American-based lander to end up on the moon, had a fuel tank rupture and had to end its mission early. So congratulations, Intuitive Machines. You will be the first if this is a success. Despite the successful orbital insertion, shares in Intuitive Machines fell 15% on the NASDAQ. So Intuitive Machines is a SPAC base. It came into the public markets via SPAC. Lots of SPACs have been doing quite poorly, but Intuitive Machines shot up quite a bit over the last week. They were, as of a month ago, at $2.56, and at their peak it hit somewhere around $11. They've had quite the multiplier effect with their successes as of late, but as is usual, once the news actually reaches the public's ears, people start to sell again. The gains have been captured, and now lots of people want to capture those gains by selling some of the shares. Perhaps they'll hold on to a certain percentage just in case they do actually believe in the fundamentals of the company, and they think that it will continue to increase in its value for shareholders. We will leave this article there. Let's move on to the payload that was on the Nova C lander called Lonestar. This payload is owned by Lonestar Data Holdings, which performed this demo on the 19th. The payload transmitted and received data from the Odysseus or Nova C spacecraft, which was a President's Day themed document on behalf of the state of Florida. Okay, interesting. It's called Lonestar Data Holdings, which gives me the impression it's a Texan company. But we're talking about payload transmission on behalf of the state of Florida. The transmissions of Lonestar radio spectrum represent the first proof of concept for a data center in deep space. The next Intuitive Machines mission, expected later this year, will include a prototype with 8 terabytes of storage that will transmit from the lunar surface. The CEO has raised roughly $6 million for the startup, and their product is to provide cheap long-term cold storage of large data sets, often for regulatory compliance. I guess it makes sense. There are a lot of issues with the potential physical interference of data centers here on Earth. People can break in. There could be natural disasters that destroy the data center, but if it's on the moon, it's relatively insulated from those types of low frequency events, but it will have to deal with other sorts of problems such as the extreme temperatures and radiation issues. The team was thinking about storing user data in geostationary orbit before landing on Earth's largest natural satellite, the moon. They did do a cost-benefit analysis, weighing space travel against using some sort of standard Earth-based data center. The cost of cooling, powering, and securing the data on the lunar surface outweighs the expensive one-way ticket to the moon. We are going to move on to Article 3. Varda capsule lands in Utah. What time are we? 13:21. Doing what? Doing good. This roughly 1 meter in diameter capsule landed yesterday on the 21st in Utah. It was floating around, but it had not received permission to actually re-enter Earth's atmosphere and to land. Someone screwed up the paperwork, and they had to wait floating around in orbit until they were given the green light, and then Rocket Lab, who provided the vehicle that got the Varda capsule into a certain orbit and then will help it descend back into Earth's atmosphere. So, what do they say? It launched 2023 on SpaceX's Transporter 8 rideshare mission, and Varda was using it to test space manufacturing technologies, producing crystals of a drug called ritonavir that would be returned to Earth in the capsule. It issues getting a license from the FAA and approvals from the Air Force. The company received the approvals on February 14th, and they were cleared to perform the landing on February 21st. From clearance to landing, 7 days. That's a great turnaround. Good for them. Very impressive. The landing site was an ellipsis, 45 by 35 kilometers, with the southern part of UTTR and the neighboring Dugway Proving Ground. Varda did not disclose the exact location of the capsule landing. The reentry required a series of maneuvers by the main spacecraft to go from a circular orbit to an elliptical orbit. So instead of Earth, you essentially give yourself a parabola such that you will eventually land on the Earth. As this mission was a phenomenal feat and impressive display of teamwork between Rocket Lab and Varda teams to develop a unique and highly capable spacecraft. Most of the work for the spacecraft would have been done by Rocket Lab. Rocket Lab some options and give us the weight, mass profile throughout this manufacturing pod, and the max size of the pod. Could be wrong. Maybe Varda has some in-company experts on aerospace. Maybe they hired out. Who knows? Varda said it will ship the capsule back to its California headquarters. The company is preparing for a second mission, also using a Rocket Lab spacecraft that will launch this summer. They announced an agreement with an Australian company, Southern Launch, to land the capsule at their test range in southern Australia. So apparently they are tired of going through the American bureaucratic system. The success of this reentry mission will also inform our work on developing a reentry capsule for Neutron to potentially enable human spaceflight missions. Who said that? Rocket Lab? All right, that's Article 2. We are going to briefly talk about the ERS-2 reentry, and then I'm going to let you go. The ERS-2 reentry, there was this massive 2,500 kilogram satellite that was just floating around. It had died 6 years into its mission, had been floating around for the last 10 years. Most of it's going to burn up on reentry, but some of it, including a 45 kilogram antenna, will not. And so that had the potential of falling on top of someone's head on Earth. We have no news is good news in this regard. I have not heard anything. They landed just north of Hawaii, west of the U.S. mainland, with no complications. Compare their estimation. On February 22nd, they predicted that it was going to fall at the end of the 21st at 5:04. That was with an uncertainty of about an hour, half an hour. So at 15:35 CET, they received no new observations of ERS-2. This may mean that the satellite has already re-entered, but we are waiting for information from our partners. And then they confirmed the re-entry was at 5:17 UTC. So they said 5:04, 5:17, definitely within their error bars. Well done, ESA. Thank you very much for tracking your dead satellites. It's a very important safety step, and I think we should all give a round of applause to our friends over in Europe. Anyways, that's the show. Thank you so much for sticking around. If you really like these videos, please like, subscribe. It really helps the channel out, and we will see each other tomorrow. Bye for now.